This is the final report of the Free Voice of Enunion's field correspondent on the flashpoint conflict between the Enunion Stabilization and Assistance Force and the Enunion Independence Militia. The following video contains images that may disturb some viewers with graphic content. News travels quickly in the West. A sense of community had built up between the civilians caught in the crossfire of the endless war that they had been forced to endure. And it was through this community that the word spread that things were not going according to plan in the ESAF's violent pushback against the insurgents hiding in the hills. I had already travelled out to the Delcar along with the ESAF forces preparing to go to war, leaving them only at the edge of the operational area to join my colleagues in the press center. But word quickly spread that the assault on the EIM fighters hiding in the mountains had gone terribly awry. Claims of refugees being shot by both sides. A full-on attack on civilian population centers. This couldn't possibly be the ESAF that I had known. The ESAF that would hide in their fortified positions as the people of Enunion under their care were butchered by gleeful insurgents. I needed to find out the truth for you seekers. I pressured the press center and the ESAF representative there to let me go into the conflict zone to find out what was really going on. They refused. But the Free Voice of Enunion does not falter in the discovery of the truth. Utilizing every favor I could call, and every trick in the Truth Seeker's arsenal, I managed to gain exclusive access for the Free Voice to visit the site of the battle. And before the sun rose on the second day, and the insurgents roused from their slumber, I was jumping into the back of an unarmored 4x4, and racing off to meet with an ESAF escort who would show me the battleground. The answers would be found. I had to walk the final few hundred meters through a track in the thick bush to meet with my escort in an unassuming clearing that was the meeting place of several bush trails the locals had been using during more peaceful times. I found my team. My photography equipment had been confiscated by the ESAF representatives before I was allowed to go. Thankfully, this information hadn't been shared with the men on the ground, so I was able to borrow a camera off one of the soldiers known as Yogi. I explained to my personal bodyguard, one Doug, that I had been given information that there were several sites of interest in the region where the locals claimed atrocities had been committed. My guard extracted a map and showed me the points where we were to visit. I noticed another point that I hadn't been told about, a small spot inked in with whiteboard marker to the north in a heavily vegetated gully. I asked my bodyguard what was there, and he told me that their reconnaissance teams had said it was a water purification site. I told him that I wanted to visit that as well, after the other areas. He immediately told me that it wouldn't be a problem. It was unusual to have the red carpet rolled out like this, being given the freedom to go where I pleased. Either the men were very confident in the area's security, or they didn't much care whether I made it or not. It was most likely the latter we discovered, as the escort was ambushed almost the instant we began traveling towards the refugee camp. The attack emphasized the point of a gruesome message left by the EIM, a slain soldier whose mutilated body was left by the side of the road with a sign warning all others of a similar fate awaiting them. I was forced to hide near the rotting body during the fight as the ESAF cleared the path ahead towards the refugee camp. Eventually, the EIM was driven back, and I was able to approach the camp. My escort waited at the tree line as I went in alone to survey the tent city, a silent admission that they knew they were no longer welcome here. It seems that the desecrated corpse of the soldier on the road was simply a precursor to prepare me for what I was about to witness. The previous day and a half had taken an incredible toll on the civilians hiding in the refugee camp. Bodies lay where they were shot, and the smell of cordite and rot hung in the air like an early morning fog. I had hoped to speak with some of the people here, but no one dared leave the tent during daylight hours, when snipers could spot them, and fighting could break out at any moment. I photographed what happened, the stories the fallen told, but without someone to tell me what had happened, there was no point in staying to document everything that happened. I would have never left otherwise. With that grisly task thankfully over, I followed the faint trails of blood leading away to the north of the city. My escort, now out of sight of the camp, rejoined me as we crossed an open field to a bulldozer and a mound of dirt. I steeled myself for what I knew I would be finding there. The mass grave was even worse than the camp. The tarp used to cover the bodies was damp with dew and translucent, hiding little of what was thrown underneath. The EIM had grown tired of the dead littering the camp, so had dragged the bodies out into the field to be disposed of. Limbs were hacked apart to compress the slain together, the skulls of the fallen marking the burial site. I asked my escort about who these people were. Who had killed them? Why? They were tight-lipped about what had happened, blaming the deaths on the militia who had used these people as an example to the rest of the refugees when they had overtaken the camp. This failed to explain the freshness of some of the bloodstains, and the fact that my shoes left prints on the grass as I circled the site. At this point, the press center contacted me, saying that my documentation was suddenly under threat of being revoked. I moved upwind of the grave and rested by the bulldozer as I negotiated with the rendition and possible extension of my stay. Whilst the free voice fought to keep the voice free, I managed to convince my escort to show me some sort of communications station that hid just before the bush sprang up thickly at the edge of the field. It was a ramshackle affair, put together from the cheapest components, powered by nothing more than a few car batteries, and after checking the station carefully for traps, we opened it up. It revealed nothing more than spare parts. Considering its proximity to the EIM-controlled camp, it was likely a station used to broadcast their lies and propaganda, a theory that later proved correct when they did just that. At last, after nearly an hour of negotiation, I was allowed to continue with my investigation. We traveled west, up the foothills of the Rilchard Range. The vegetation was thick, and my escort was moving very slowly and nervously in an area where setting up an ambush would be as easy as simply crouching down. A dried riverbed snaked its way through the thick foliage up the mountain to where the water purifier was said to be. Progress was tortuously slow, as our escort had been constantly losing men who were pulled away to attend other tasks. At times I only had 2 or 3 soldiers with me, and they were most unwilling to venture into enemy territory with such few numbers. Eventually, a few men were sourced from somewhere, and were able to push up the hill. Whilst I realized the danger we were in, the quietness and the fact that no one, not even the most forward scouts, had been opportunistically shot at yet made me impatient. No one was there, yet we were still slowly crawling along as the sun slid quickly across the sky. Time was running short. Eventually, we made it to the water purifier. It was a sad, lonely device situated just above the creek, siphoning a pathetic trickle of water from the creek, which barely had a flow this high up the mountain. It slowly worked on cleaning out the filthy, muddy stream's water into something potable. Water had become an issue with the men too, with their own supplies running dry. My bodyguard did what was necessary to look after the men under his command, and I contacted the press center to alert them to what had been found. They radioed back with important news.